If by chance you happen to have seen any of my videos, read any of the stuff I post on Medium, or, just read the channel description really, you're probably painfully aware of how much I like fighting games and competition in general. What you might not know is that I also really like reading. So I figured we would together take a stroll into the gardens of competitive-based literature. And what better place to start than the original book you turned to when it was time to kick ass? The Art of War, written by pseudo-historical person Sun Tzu. If you know anyone who likes to take themselves a little bit too seriously, you probably already heard about the Art of War. It's often touted as being extremely important by business-savvy people who think they're this guy,
Everybody have a good week!
but are in reality this dude.
Some knowledge that I have just acquired when they were going up one-on-one, kind of stabbing each other.
Any use of the Art of War in the modern era, and for our admittedly less serious topic, is gonna need a hefty amount of disregarding any and all mentions of wagons of silver,
That's something to consider, guys, when you're shopping for a treasure chest for your silver.
where to put your army when things are on fire, and the tax rate of peasants. We're gonna couple this with a generous dose of interpretation, and with that way actually get some use out of certain passages in the Art of War. With that being said, let's just dive into it. The first couple of passages we're looking at pretty clearly relate to the importance of good information and how one basically sets themselves up to lose when opting out of doing your research.
Knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be obtained from other men. He who exercises no forethought but makes light of his opponents is sure to be captured by them.
Now, I don't think it will come as news to people that fighting a player or a matchup you're entirely unfamiliar with is a bit like fighting in the dark. And if your opponent has done their homework, well, then they might as well have night vision goggles. Sun Tzu, however, continues.
We are not fit to lead an army on the march unless we are familiar with the face of the country, its mountains and forests, its pitfalls and precipices. We shall be unable to turn natural advantage to account unless we make use of local guides.
And this is where I want to focus. A recurring thought trap I often find in the heads of new and veteran players alike is the idea that you have to put on your glasses and coat and, after every session. A criminally underused asset in fighting games particularly ends up being the player base itself. Having trouble in one particular matchup? Why don't you ask players of that character to help you out? And with the advent of character discords, well, it's never been easier. People love talking about things they have invested time in, and are generally going to be helpful as long as you don't act like a whiny bitch. Not only is this a great resource that generally goes unexploited, it can also help with getting over player-induced rage issues. This type of thinking tends to be detrimental to both your enjoyment of the game and your overall performance. In closing, it's super important to be armed with the correct knowledge when engaging in competition, and utilizing local guides, as Sun Tzu calls them, who already grasp said knowledge is an easy and underused way to learn. We'll start out again with a couple of words from our old pal Sun Tzu.
What the ancients called a clever fighter is one who not only wins, but excels in winning with ease. The skilled fighter puts himself into a position which makes defeat impossible, and does not miss the moment for defeating the enemy.
The thing I want to take note of here is the importance of strong defense. A complaint I hear often from intermediate players, especially ones that mainly practice versus very strong players, is that they do poorly versus on paper weaker players who just random them out.
God, man. What's up with these fucking sloppy ass Nashes, dude? They just mashing a bunch of fucking...
Shut up, bitch!
Newsflash, this is because you have terrible defense. Veteran players tend to have very strong defense, which is why the intermediates feel like they get to play more versus them. Because it's generally safer to kill your opponent for their mistakes rather than forcing your way through with offense. Again, a bit of a known factor, this thought. Sun Tzu once again adds to this though, with the following.
In war, the victorious strategist only seeks battle after the victory has been won, whereas he who is destined to defeat first fights and afterwards looks for victory. How victory may be produced for them out of the enemy's own tactics, that is what the multitude cannot comprehend. All men can see the tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved.
And these passages clearly relate to what I wanted to bring up. Risk mitigation can, in a lot of instances, be entirely invisible if you don't know what you're looking for. Both offense and defense can be made way less risky by use of option coverage and option selects. It's very easy to look at a situation like this and applaud how sick the reads of the Shaheen player was. But in reality, this is a set of identical inputs that vastly reduce the risk of the defender and forces the attacker to take much bigger risks. The same kind of risk mitigating can be seen in offensive option select, where you as the attacker either take zero risk or force extremely high risk options from your opponent.
This is bullshit. Gotcha, bitch.
In both these cases, the actual game outcomes will just look like a series of the right decisions being made. Understanding how to apply defensive and offensive option selects or key actions that cover a lot of the available countermeasures is one of the best things an intermediate player can sink their teeth into. The third and final lesson we're gonna learn from the Art of War today relates to something Sun Tzu called Indirect Tactics.
In all fighting, the direct method may be used for joining battle, but indirect methods will be needed in order to secure victory. Indirect tactics, efficiently applied, are inexhaustible as heaven and earth. Therefore, the clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him.
Now, these passages can probably be interpreted in 1,000 different ways. But it made me want to talk about quote-unquote dirty tactics and bad-mannered play. In this era of online play, these types of tactics are not as heavily discussed, but are nevertheless very important. Getting under your opponent's skin can turn, on paper, unwinnable battles into free wins. I was going to describe this a lot more, but I figure I'll just hand over this point to someone that argues it way better than I could.
This guy is intentionally, when he gets knocked down, he walks up, this is how he put it, I knocked him to the ground, and I walked up to implement my Okizeme mix-ups, and he started violently mashing the buttons and moving the stick. And I, in my mind, became extremely scared. This is what he said. Mago. You guys know who Mago and Dago are? This is like one of the best players there is on the planet, you know? He's like, I was very scared, so I decided to block. And Samford got up and threw me. And he did this 5 times in a row. So, let's recap. Mago, 2D God, the best player, one of the best players, was not ready for Samford Kelly's 16, 17, or 20-year-old strategy of fucking dead buttoning and shoulder pumping. Alex Valle used to do that shit at Southern Hills Golfland. I have to say, I learned it from him. I have to say it. You know, I don't love sucking his dick. Dead buttoning, faking, shoulder pumping. The fact that yesterday during the tournament, when I was doing King multi-parts, I was looking at my opponent's hands. That was my strat. I mean, if you're going to break the multi-throw, you better cover your fucking hands, because I have eyes, you know? I have eyes. I'm not going to go, oh, I could just look over here and the answer's right here, but I'm not going to look there. I'm just going to look this way. Why would you even do that? What's the point? The guy's right there. He's got hands. I'm right here. I got eyes. The answer is right there. Why would I not fucking look at his hands? It's the same concept.
So that about concludes our lessons today from The Art of War. There's definitely a ton more you can construe from it if you want to, but there's also a ton more, you know, about like what to do when you and your boys get stuck in a swamp. So it's a bit, you know, it's a bit iffy there, a bit of gray Sony. If you did find this like interesting, I would recommend that you give it a read. It's like 50 something pages long. It's very short. It's also freely available for no cost online. Just download a PDF. I think all in all, it's not super good, I guess. I'd give it like 5 out of 10 Seth Killians. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please consider giving me a subscribe or a comment, or, you know, a like, I guess. I'm not sure how the system works at all, but, you know, any of those things is good, you know, viewer engagement and all that. And with that, I think we'll leave off with a final quote from our pal Sun Tzu.
He who can modify his tactics in relation to his opponent and thereby succeed in winning may be called a heaven-born captain.